Evaluation of elements of diversity. So I did my presentation on the two schools. The one I was supposed to observe, which was Myra A. Noble Elementary in Bakersfield, and the elementary school I went to, which would be Monte Vista Elementary in Porterville. So the number of students at each school, Noble had way more than Monte Vista. Noble had 890 and Monte Vista had 453. The socially economically disadvantaged at Noble had 95.2% and Monte Vista had 87.4%. The English learners, Noble had 32.5% and Monte Vista had 33.8%. It was interesting to see how those were kind of like almost the same percentage. They're only like 1% away about. And finally, the students with disabilities, which would Noble had 71 students with disabilities and Monte Vista had 30. So you can see the significant difference in the number of students to begin with, and the students with disabilities. The English learners was about the same, and there was like a 10% difference in the social economically disadvantaged. So that was already interesting to find, but you have to consider the number of students to even compare them. So next I have students' ethnicity, because I wanted to show you guys the different ethnic groups and the comparison between the two schools. So to begin with, we have Monte Vista. There were American Indian, 3 kids. There were white students, 53 white students, 6 2 or more race students. There were 8 Asian students, 2 African American students, and 364 Hispanic students. Next, we have Noble, which had 4 American Indian students, 103 white students, 16 2 or more race students, 1 Asian student, 53 African American students, and 712 Hispanic students. So it was interesting to compare to see what ethnicity was more in each school, which would be the Hispanics both took the cake on each school, which makes sense because in the valley there's a lot of Hispanics. And then there was the second was the white students. They were second, and then you could just compare the two. It was actually interesting to see how many more African American students there were at Noble than there were at Monte Vista. I didn't realize that there was such a big difference. All right, so next we had the ELA and math performance. So the ELA performance in Noble, they were in the orange, and this was the Hispanic socially disadvantaged students and students with disabilities and white. And then Monte Vista had the Hispanic and English learners and socially economic disadvantaged, and they were also in orange. So both the schools were in orange in the ELA area. And then we have their math area, which was in yellow. The Noble had Hispanic, socially disadvantaged students with disabilities and white, and Monte Vista had Hispanic, English learners, and social economically disadvantaged. So it was interesting to see how the math was also both the same thing in yellow. Even the comparison between the students, because you would think that at least Monte Vista would have more of an advantage since they have less students, but it was actually the same. So that was really interesting. You would think that they would be more in green. All right, next we have the chronic abstinism. I cannot pronounce that. But for Monte Vista, so we had for the orange, we had students with disabilities. For the yellow, we had white students. And for the green, we had Hispanic, English learners, and social economically disadvantaged. So you could see who missed more and who missed less. Next, we have Noble. So for the orange, we had African American. For Hispanics, for the yellow, we had Hispanics, social economically disadvantaged students. And finally, for the green, we had students with disabilities and English learners. So it was interesting to see how many more students were going to school and were not going to school, and what kind of students were there. I was actually surprised with the orange outcomes because I didn't expect that, but it was really, really interesting to find that out. And that is the end of my PowerPoint. Thank you.